Hey, so I'm gonna do something that's a little bit, removed from the Onision thing. I don't want to focus on that forever, so uh, I'm just gonna talk about a topic, a subject, and you can kind of see for yourself whether it is or it isn't related. I think it's kind of related to everything that happens, and it's something that's interests me particularly because I used to be an actor. I still consider myself an actor. I love acting. And actually, a little bit of background on me. If you Google my name, Walter McMain, and then IMDb for Internet Movie Database, I actually have a credit for an extra role, like three extra roles I did on the YouTube channel Smosh. And so if anyone's telling me that I'm doing stuff for views, look, I already got my views. Reginald Peabody, maybe you've heard of him. He died at the end of Our Smoshy Life. But that's me. Me. I'm the guy who's holding onto the chain link fence, screaming as the meth lab explodes. Yeah. So that's me though. And I was hired as an extra through a casting agency. Yeah. So I've done YouTube before. Not very much, obviously, but you want to talk about views. I think that video has more than 9 million views. So there's my views. That's all the views I can handle, I think. So what it has to relate to, though, is this concept of a narrative, a story, really. And actually, the textbook definition, narrative, it's a noun. It's a spoken or written account of connected events, or a story. It's and a narrative can be about real things. It can be about fake things, and it can even bridge the gap. It can be about both. It can be a little bit of reality and a little bit of fantasy, like a good lie. Uh, and narratives are constructed. They're built, and we build narratives every single day because none of us really has a complete 100% grasp on reality. None of us can really claim to know the full truth, the true truth of a situation. We can't see every angle. We can't hear someone else's thoughts. We don't know what goes on in other people's brains. Whether you're a popular YouTuber or someone like me, I don't know what's going on in my viewers' brains. I can guess. I can construct my own narrative in a way to reflect what I think might be going on in someone's brain, but I don't know. And we all build narratives about ourselves and about the people around us every day. And it starts from a very young age, and kids will start going to their friends, and they want to know what their friends think. They want to know what adults think. Teens will start looking for idols, popular people that are smart, anybody who seems like they have any sort of authority to help them fill in their own narrative and their narrative about the world. And adults will turn on the news so that they can see a narrative about their country and about the world. So it's not like a bad thing that we do this, it's a necessary thing. We all need to do this. We all need to help build our own narrative and enrich it with details and opinions and as many facts as we can get our hands on, and try to build a better narrative and a better story about ourselves and about the world. And this is why media is important. This is why television shows, movies, books, YouTubers, blogs, they're all really important because these are our sources of narrative about ourselves. Even a fantasy story where there's goblins and orcs and stuff, it separates itself from the narrative that we have of our world and lets us look at things from a different perspective. And also, being removed from reality, we can also touch on narratives and stories that we don't really like to talk about in reality. We can see situations that we wouldn't want to see happening in real life, and in doing so, kind of separate the more painful sides of a real world narrative from other aspects of that narrative, and get a deeper look at them without reality clogging it up and getting in the way. And so it's really an important thing for everybody. And narratives are most effective when they line up with a narrative that we're already telling to ourselves about ourselves. When someone agrees with you on something, it's a lot easier to take in what they're saying. Uh, when it agrees with something that you've had in your own mind about yourself, it's a lot easier to take in what we're saying. I mean, that's what an insult is. An insult is someone looking at you and trying to identify a weak spot, a spot that they know that you have a narrative you tell about yourself every day. Like, for me, example, um, one of the nasty comments I got from one of Anisian's fans was they mentioned my long hair and then they called me gay over it. I deleted the comment because they said a whole bunch of other horrible stuff, and I was like, well, this is just a bit too much for me. But, in high school, that used to happen to me a lot. I had a lot of people call me gay. Um, Probably because I was a pretty mouthy, and I would say other rude things to other people and things that they didn't agree with. And so they looked at me and they tried to identify something that they thought that would get to me. And you used to. Used to until I became an adult. I learned more about myself. I learned more about my narrative. I broadened my narrative. I realized more about who I was, and I even realized I'm bisexual. I actually am attracted to guys, so they were partially right, but I was actually attracted to both sexes. So, or there's more than that now. I don't know. Things change. Narratives change. They get deeper. There's more to them than what you see in the beginning. So those comments don't bother me anymore. I've had worse. I've had people who really deeply know my narrative, who played a big role in my narrative, say mean things to me that really did hurt. People who I respected, people who I wronged that I respected, that then criticized me and were spot on. But in that criticism, they helped me construct a better narrative about myself and realize that I was doing something that I didn't agree with, that I thought was wrong, and I was able to change it. And so that is now a part of my narrative that went from being a negative thing to a positive thing, because they gave me something tangible to work on. And that's why this is so important, because there's storytellers all over in our lives. In fact, that's all we ever really do. When your parents ask you, how did school go, what they're looking for is a narrative about their child. They're looking for a story, and they would really like one that agrees with the thoughts that they have. And if they think their kid's a good kid, they want to hear about the good things that their kid did that day. And the converse is true too. The inverse of that is true as well. If they don't think very well of their kid, and their kid says everything was fine, don't worry about it, they might be suspicious. If they hear a bad story, they might rail on them about it. Whether or not that's going to actually help them improve their situation, whether or not the narrative that they're telling back to their kid is going to be a useful one for them down the road or not. And so this is why narrative is fascinating to me, because there really isn't anything other than that in our minds going on. There really isn't anything other than a story we are telling ourselves. And there's a great quote about narrative, and it was one of the things that really stuck with me. And it was, this is a quote: "The past is just a story we tell ourselves." And this is true of really everything. Everything is just a story we tell ourselves, whether it's the past, or it's the present moment, or it's the future. And a lot of people spend a lot of time worrying about the future, worrying about where their life is headed, and they tell themselves a narrative about where their life is headed. And this can be a source of anxiety and depression for a lot of people. It is for me. I worry about the things that I have yet to do in my life. And sometimes I'll get carried away with telling myself a narrative about how bad it's going to be, forgetting that there's going to be other people and other situations that are going to create different kinds of narratives, and narratives that I couldn't predict or I couldn't expect about the world and about myself and about the people in my life around me. But without the world and without myself and without the people around me, there wouldn't be any narrative. There wouldn't be any story to tell. And depending on how I tell that story, it can change the way I'm looking at any one of those things. It can change the way I look at my past, it can change the way I look at myself, and it can change the way I look at my future. So narrative is a lot more powerful than it really seems. It seems like a story is just a story, and just let it go, it's just a story. Well, it's not just a story. It helps inform ourselves and about the world. And in a way, it's almost more important than the real world. it isn't really more important because the real world is still a real world. You can close your eyes and it's still there. But the way we come to understand it and see ourselves in it and see our path down the road and the path that we have just taken, all of those things are determined by the narrative we're telling. So our relationship with reality is built through narrative and through story. So it is pretty important when you really look at it. This is why we do things, so that we can tell a narrative about it, so we can tell ourselves about it. And in acting it out, in playing our part, in our role in this story, we help include ourselves in reality, include ourselves in other people's narratives, so other people can look at us and tell a story about us that we like a little bit more, that helps, again, return to us and inform us again about our narrative. When we do something good and people have good things to say about it, that's a good narrative. And it feels good to have a good narrative. So keep that in mind, just going forward in life, that narrative is really important. The books you read, the television shows you watch, the YouTubers you follow, every story that you watch informs you a little bit more every day about yourself, the world, your past, your future, everything. So, there's my piece. Hope to see you again in another video.